Alright, so here we are. This is what everyone has been waiting for. The main motherfucking event we have. All Might versus All for One. Now, of course, this is going to be basically a two-part, like, kind of episode. Like their fight will be between this episode and then, of course, next week's episode. I'm not sure if you guys might have seen, but they did actually release a pretty nice trailer, like, for this fight, All Might versus All for One, that, has been making the rounds on Twitter recently. And, on that little trailer, it did basically, say that this fight was going to be, spanning across two episodes. So, let's just quickly get through the stuff that kind of happens at the start and then get to the main thing. So, the episode kind of picks up at where the last episode, like, at about a halfway point, remember, All Might and Kamui Woods and Gran Torino and them, they kind of had taken control of the bar when all of a sudden, the black kind of sludge warp appeared and Nomu started showing up. Well, we go back there and we see that all of the League of Villains and Bakugo, they're all sucked up into the little warps. Endeavor is going to take care of all of the Nomus. In the meantime, All Might and Gran Torino are going to head over to the Nomu factory where All for One is and try and take him down, because it's basically established that Best Jeanist and everyone over at the factory had essentially failed. Now, it cuts back over there, and All for One is kind of given like a speech or a monologue, and we see like exactly what happened. In the last episode, it ended with All for One basically shooting a Dragon Ball Z blast at Best Jeanist and the other heroes that were there. Here we see that in the last instance just beforehand, Best Jeanist was able to basically, use the fabric and everyone's clothes to kind of yank them all to the side so they didn't catch the full brunt of what All for One was shooting out. But Best Jeanist himself, he basically does take the full blast of it. So he is just like laying on the ground, badly injured. You see that he's hurt pretty bad. And he kind of has a flashback of the police detective basically going over stuff with a bunch of the other heroes there and explaining that All for One likely wouldn't make a move if it was going to risk himself. And Best Jeanist is kind of like, this is not what I was told. Now, see, this is something that I think could come back up later on in the anime or manga. I feel like this is something that hasn't even really been touched on even in the manga at this point. This scene that Best Jeanist is talking about. But I feel as though there could be some implication there. Well, obviously we know that All for One, like, based upon how he acts in this episode, like, his main goal is to groom Shigaraki into really being, like, a big-time boss villain, right? So All for One basically exposes himself, here at this scene in the Kamino Ward so that he can get Shigaraki out. That's basically All for One's only goal here, is just to protect Shigaraki, because, Shigaraki was dead to rights, in All Might's clutches at the bar. So Best Jeanist is kind of, like, very shocked by this, and I also think there could be some sort of implication that there could be, like, a mole or a snitch or a traitor. It's already been hinted at, by President Mike and Nezu and a bunch of the other teachers at UA. But I think it's possible that there's not one traitor. There could be a couple. There could be one in the police force, and there could be one amongst the teachers at UA, or even among Class 1A, among the UA students. I think there are probably several traitors around. All for One does kind of touch on later on about how All Might, like, took down basically all of All for One's comrades, right? Like, tore them all apart, tore down, like, the mafia and the crime society, and basically, became the symbol of peace, basically wiped all that shit out. And, like, All for One, the way he's talking, like, you kind of get the feeling that, like, there's big moves that they've been planning to try and get rid of All Might and to topple the hero society. Now, All for One deems that Best Jeanist Quirk is something that he makes exceptional through his training and his experience as a pro hero. So he decides, nah, bruh, I don't need that. And that kind of, like, is an opposition to what Shigaraki's personality's like. So I don't need to take that, because it looks as though what All for One is doing is he's collecting quirks, and then eventually he's just going to pass all that shit on to Shigaraki. So eventually, later on in My Hero, we could see a point where Shigaraki's going to get a disgusting power buff, and he gets like a whole mess of quirks. Because All For One can take quirks from anyone, and then he can give people quirks as well. So we'll see what eventually happens with that. Now, in deciding that he doesn't want Best Jeanist's quirk, he basically shoots a giant hole in Best Jeanist's stomach, and basically he turned, like in Yu Yu Hakusho, when Hiei used Darkness of the Dragon Flame and like turned that one dude Zero into a shadow on the wall. That's basically what All For One does to Best Jeanist right here. Turned his ass like into a shadow, bro. And All For One is just standing there, you know, basically really feeling himself. We do get a shot of, you know, Deku and the others basically are not able to move because of like the overwhelming presence of All For One. Bakugo and all the other villains show up. The warp that All For One used, he does talk about it and says that the way it's able to work is that he can draw people either to him or away from him. And basically, he explains it works kind of like Goku's instant transmission, where he could only send people with that ability to someone he's already aware of. It's kind of like how Goku, you know, he can use the instant transmission if he senses someone's ki, and he could teleport to them, right? It kind of works the same thing. Now, All Might basically very, very quickly gets there, and he kind of begins duking it out with All For One. All For One, like, disses him bad and points out, like, you know, oh, you know, you're pretty slow, my boy. That took you, you know, a full 30 seconds after I sent the Nomus out over there. Not good, not good. Your age is catching up. And they kind of trade barbs, you know. All Might mentions how, like, you know, All For One, he's got the mask on. You know, we know his face is fucked up from their fight that they had 6 years ago. Now, All Might tries to rush All For One, and All For One shoots him back with a combination of quirks. He mentions that it's an air cannon, spring-like limbs, kinetic booster ×4, and strength enhancer ×3. So these are all different quirks he had managed to steal from people, and he mentions this combination as fun. He basically, it's almost like the technique he uses is like the whirlwind fist that I believe his name is Jin in Yu Yu Hakusho uses, where it's kind of like this big twister fist. That's almost kind of what All For One does to All Might here, and it blows him way back. We see him go through a couple buildings. So clearly All Might, you know, he does still have a good, impressive amount of stamina to able to be, you know, blown through multiple buildings and then still come back to fight, which he does. He immediately jumps right back up on the scene and begins to fight All For One. Now, just before All Might was able to get back, All For One does show another quirk he has. He's able to shoot out like these red and black kind of, like, it's almost like long fingernails or cords or something, and he's able to forcibly activate someone's quirk. So this is where he has the warp gate, the black hole motherfucker, you know, create one of his warps, and then all the League of Villains members are going to get the fuck out of there so they don't get arrested, or All Might is not able to take them down. So at this point, the villains begin, you know, encircling Bakugo, and they're trying to basically, you know, kidnap him and get him into the black hole, while All Might and All For One are kind of going back and forth. All Might, you know, his priority is to save Bakugo, but, you know, All For One is basically just kind of fighting, I don't want to say defensively, but just to keep All Might, you know, away from Shigaraki and the other League of Villains members. So Deku and the others, Deku, you know, being the, I don't know, I want to say genius, but he's always very, very clever and quick on his feet. He does manage to come up with a plan where they will use everyone's quirks that are there. Well, except for Momo. Momo doesn't help here. But Ida and Deku, they use their quirks to kind of blast forward with Kirishima. Kirishima activates his hardening, so they go through the wall that's in front of them. And also, because Kirishima has kind of become like friends with Bakugo, he's able to call out to Bakugo, so Bakugo can use his explosion, go way up in the air, and catch on to them. They also have Todoroki kind of create an ice ramp after they destroy the wall. So they do this kind of, you know, really good plan. This scene, they shoot up, Kirishima calls to Bakugo, and Bakugo does indeed use his explosion to get up to him. Now, I gotta say, this scene, like, the animation, of course, for this whole episode is absolutely on point, which is what we would have figured. And this Bakugo scene in particular was incredible. Like, the animation as Bakugo basically uses his, explosion to explode up and catch up to Deku and the other was really, really good. And we do see a cool part, too, is Deku deduces that even though, All Might is trying to get to Bakugo, All For One is kind of holding him back. And he says, but this will work in reverse. And we see All For One actually goes to attack Deku and Ida and Kirishima, but All Might jumps in and fucking bitch slaps All For One the fuck out of there. They continue their fight in the meantime while Deku and the rest are able to actually, extract Bakugo out of there. At this point, Magne actually reveals his quirk, or, her quirk, however you want to say it, because Magne is a tranny, I believe. So Magne has this, kind of magnetism type quirk. So he goes to shoot some of the League of Villains up to Deku and the rest to kind of keep Bakugo from getting away. But Mount Lady kind of jumps up, turns herself giant, and blocks the League of Villains from getting to Deku. And then at this point, Gran Torino comes in and knocks a couple other members of the League of Villains down as well. But All For One, very impressively, while fighting All Might, is able to use, his quirk activation on Magne and then kind of get all the League of Villains members into the black hole and escape. So every single member of the League of Villains is able to make it out of there. And then we do see kind of a little scene with Shigaraki, too, where, we saw a little flash of this in the last episode, but we see it again here, where Shigaraki is kind of, confronted when he's a small child by All For One, and, he's in shadow, we don't see his face or anything, but we see him kind of, reach his hand out to Shigaraki and let him know that, he understands, that everyone abandoned him. So that's obviously stuff that will come back up, back out to play at a later date. All For One is able to kind of latch on to Gran Torino using, all these combination of quirks he has. See, this is why, I really like what I've seen from All For One. I do think it could have been better, though. Not particularly the episode in anime. This is more, I guess, a criticism of, the manga and, this whole part in particular, right? The anime absolutely did this complete justice, but I do wish we had seen a little bit more from All For One. I think his quirks could have been used in a little bit more of a creative way, but he's still, he's able, clearly, Horikoshi, the, author of the manga, he just wanted to show enough, right? A good fight with All Might and All For One, but, most of what All For One is doing here is very, very limited, very tame. Clearly, he has way more at his disposal, but he also is still suffering from serious injuries, as is All Might. So he's not, reaching deep into his bag of tricks for everything. So he is able to kind of swing Gran Torino in front of him, and All Might hits him with a pretty devastating punch. And then All For One also kind of mixes in another quirk, like a shock absorption and repulsion. So All Might hits Gran Torino, it does massive damage to Gran Torino, but then there's blowback and it hurts All Might as well. So All For One, being very sneaky with some of these quirks he uses. Now, All Might kind of, I don't want to say he powers up, but he kind of gives a little bit of a little speech. We know how All Might is gonna be. He's got the smile on. He is talking that good shit. He kind of says a bunch of stuff, and then he's able to, power through All For One and, pin him to the ground and destroy his mask. And, it's oh, okay, did All Might possibly beat him right there? But then, nah, son. All For One laughs, and he says, ha, 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 you fucking cunt. I heard that before. Your master also said that, and he finally reveals her name, Nana Shimura. Now, Shimura, this is a name we've heard again. Now, I don't really want to, there's this whole line of dialogue, this whole discussion that's about to take place is going to continue on in the part 2, the next episode. So I don't want to go into too many details. All I'm going to say is this name drop is very big. If you go back and watch the last couple episodes and see some of the stuff All For One was talking, you should be able to piece the clues together. I'm not going to outright say it, but All For One, her name being dropped was a big reveal. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to say if y'all don't want to know, I'm not going to say it. But if y'all want to go back and kind of, watch the episode and try and figure it out, go right ahead. Today's episode was phenomenal, stupendous, outstanding, greatness, whatever you want to say, all of it works. Next week, it's going down part 2. I can't fucking wait.